Welcome everyone. My name is Derek Sims, Chairman of the Board of the Chamber of Commerce. Today's breakfast is titled Substance Abuse Awareness. What's our plan? And is being sponsored by Guardian Ad Litem, Roots and Wings, Department of Social Services, and Freedom House. Thank you to Nancy Wagner and everyone involved with these organizations for arranging today's program. We look forward to the message you'll be sharing with us this morning. And before we continue on, I'd like to recognize some elected officials we have here and some of those who will be running for office for re-election. For the county commissioners, we have Jimmy Clayton. Jimmy, he is running for re-election for county commissioner. For city council, we have Henry Daniel. Henry. We also have Mark Phillips. Mark is over there. It's hard to see everybody when we got such a big crowd. We also have Sheriff Dewey Jones. Sheriff Dewey, there he is, over there, behind the window. We also have with us today District Court Judge Mark Galloway.
Thank goodness I'm not running for re-election.
Okay. For Board of Education, we have the Chairman, Gordon Powell. And Gordon is running for County Commissioner, election for County Commissioner. We also have with us today Vice Chair Margaret Brasher, and Margaret is running for re-election for the Board of Education. We also have State House Representative Larry Yarborough. Larry is running for re-election for the State House Representative. And we also have with us Chief Hess. Chief? Over there, okay. And we also have with us Dennis Canner. Dennis, where's Dennis? Dennis is back there. Dennis is running for the Board of Education this year. And I'm excited to say we have another candidate running for Board of Education, and it's Derek Sims. So I appreciate your vote. Moving on with the program, we have some chamber announcements. And we'll have Alicia Freer to give us those announcements.
Good morning, everyone. The famous question, did we miss anyone who's running for office that we did not announce? Yay, success.
Not running.
Oh, or did we forgot to say the Register of Deeds, Amanda Gary, did we forget you?
I'm not running, I'm retired.
Superior Court
Judge Osmond Smith.
Superior Court Judge in the House.
Yes.
Judge Osmond Smith, thank you very much.
Yes.
And that is why we clarified
Yes.
before we moved on.
Yeah, I like him. Yeah. Thank you. I like him.
I think we mentioned.
I had just know it.
Well, we have a few chamber announcements. If you've been receiving our emails, you know there's a lot going on. There are more ribbon cuttings, more business after hours than I will bore you with right now because we have a very full program, but I did want to remind everyone, we have a ribbon cutting and a business after hours tomorrow at 5:30 to help Footwear Plus celebrate their 70th anniversary of being in business here in our community. We hope you will join us for that. They have a lot of fun things planned, and they've also got some additional things planned for a Saturday celebration too that they'd love to invite you to participate in. You have a lot of paperwork in front of you, and we hope that you will pay attention to every single piece at your place. But there are a couple of flyers for chamber events. One of them is for Casino Night, which will take place on October 1st at Palace Point. We are definitely eager to get your RSVPs in because we are at that critical stage where we determine how many gaming tables and which type. I know the deadline says the 23rd, but if you are able to get those RSVPs in this week, that would be really helpful. And then save the date for our annual bingo night, hosted by Joe Weinberger, set for November 10th. And just please stay tuned to your chamber emails because there's lots of important things happening in the community we want you to know about. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Alicia. At this time, I would like to invite Nancy Wagstaff to begin this morning's presentation. Nancy.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming. I got my cheat sheet in case I forget my name. I'm kind of nervous. I'm not much of a public speaker. But I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today. And Guardian Ad Litem program, co-sponsored with some other agencies, Roots and partnered together because we all love this community. I know everybody in this building loves this community. We love Person County. We think it's so great. And we want it to continue to be great. And so we wanted to bring everybody together to share a few concerns that we have that we want to bring awareness to you. And so in doing that, we hope that you'll be able to all partner with us and help us receive resources and what we need to help other people in our communities that are struggling. And so we also brought a speaker to come in today to try to explain to you a little bit more about that. But I would like to recognize Guardian Ad Litem. Are there any Guardian Ad Litem volunteers here today? I'm not sure if y'all know. Okay, thank you. Guardian Ad Litem volunteers are court-appointed child advocates, and they're the backbone of our program. Without them, there would be no program. And they do this on their own. They're not paid. They advocate for children with abuse and neglect, and they just do such a great job. And there are any social workers here today? Social workers, raise your hand. Yep, and DSS. We work with DSS, and they just do such a great job. In my opinion, they have one of the hardest jobs in the county. And they probably don't think we always believe that, but we do. They work so hard, and they are overworked. So we appreciate them so much. And then we have Ruth and Wayne, Ronnie Zunda, and Michelle. And I'm not sure if there's any other staff. Would you raise your hand?
That's 2/3 of our staff.
But Roots and Wings does such a great job. They're family advocacy, so they work with the family and the children, and they help with teamwork and try. And so a lot of other things. We call Ronnie the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps on going. He'll never give up. He keeps on going. So they do a great job too. And then Freedom House, Martha Jacob. Is anyone here from Freedom House? Here. Thank y'all too. They do a great job. We're so fortunate in Person County because mental health services are becoming harder and harder to have in counties to meet the needs of people in our county. So Freedom House does a wonderful job in serving Person County, so we thank them too. And we want to thank the police officers. I know the police department's here and the sheriff's department. They're so good about coming to our meetings when we have meetings about the needs of children and families. Somebody will be there, and we appreciate them and appreciate what they do as well. So, Bonnie's going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. I'll trip over the floor. Our name is Roots and Wings, and we believe that every child deserves the roots they need to grow and the wings they need to fly. And my oldest one is one of my friends, Paul Malsnady. Paul is an assistant professor at Duke University School of Medicine, where he's worked for the past 28 years in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences in a variety of clinical research, teaching, and administrative positions. He holds degrees from Duke University and Florida State University as a licensed professional counselor and a licensed clinical addiction specialist and a certified clinical supervisor. Paul has over 30 years in clinical research, administrative, and teaching experiences and conducts seminars and workshops to the audience across the United States. Paul has worked as an expert content director overseeing the development of treatment improvement protocols and technical assistance publications for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. And he's the author of several book chapters published by the American Psychiatric Press. He's a member of the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers and works closely with a number of behavioral treatment and community health organizations to facilitate the adoption of evidence-based practices. He's the 2008 recipient of the Triangle Business Journal Healthcare Hero Award and the 2016 Advancing Evidence-Based Practices Award from the North Carolina Evidence-Based Practice Center. Off script, I can tell you I came to this work late in life and discovered a desire to understand human behavior and maybe even to learn tools that if a human wanted to change behavior that I would need or be able to help them, and realized I was not trained for that. So I began to sign up for any training and workshop that I could within reach. And I soon found out that one of my favorite trainers was Paul Nagy. And the reason is because he spoke to me in those trainings from a broad and vast knowledge, but he delivered it to me in layman terms that I could understand and seem to apply to the work that I was doing. Ladies and gentlemen, call me.
I'm touched. That was a beautiful introduction, and I don't think I've ever had one that's affected me so much. Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate that. What a great privilege and honor to be here, and I have to say this is a very, very unique experience for me, just to actually see a whole community show up. And first of all, I'm wondering, do you have to live here to come up here? It was a beautiful drive, and it's a great opportunity to be here. So we don't have a lot of time, and I actually have a day's worth of information, so I'm going to do the best I can to hopefully enable you to take away a couple of major points that I'd like to make today. The first is to share with you that I come with a message that says, as goes our understanding and capacity to treat people with addictive disorders, this is truly, as Dickens once said, the best of times and the worst of times. Now, you probably have some idea about the worst of times, and my guess is a lot of you can give testimonials to that extent. You might be surprised why I would say, after 35 years of being in this field, why I would say this is the best of times. And quite frankly, it's the best of times because for all the years I've been involved in this field, we have made remarkable advances in our understanding of what is an addictive disorder. And from that understanding has created tremendous capacity for how to actually support people into and through lasting recovery. One reason I say it's the worst of times is because there's a disconnect between what we know we can do about this problem and what we truly actually do in practice. And the solution really lies, one of my takeaways is going to be the solution to this problem is exactly right here, right now, which is we bring the community together to understand this for what it is and to address it in ways that enable effective outcomes. So what I'm going to do with this time, my intention is to give you some sense of the scope and incidence of the problem in just kind of a summary format. And then I've got three particular takeaways that I'll share with you here in a minute, and I hope that you'll walk out having learned a little something, perhaps been a little bit inspired to do your part to participate as an agent of change. So first of all, and push me aside if I stay in front of the screen, I tend to do that. So just to let you know, in terms of statistics, you guys are probably familiar with in Roxborough, I think I saw something, Martha, did you all disseminate some information about the incidence of substance abuse in your community? And I think it's pretty similar to what we see in other communities as well. This is a problem that's well represented across the country. So conservatively, about 21.6 million Americans will actually be diagnosed as positive for a substance use disorder. And if you think about this in perspective, we've got 8.2% of the population with substance use disorders, and then we've got 9.23% with diabetes. Do you think we provide equal response to each disease? Of course not, we know that. And so this is one of those disconnects that I referred to you earlier. So I know that one of the things that you guys are concerned about, because it's ravaging your community and most communities across this country, is the epidemic of opioid addiction. And we have seen in the last 10 to 12 years a 50% increase in the incidence of people who are positive for opioid use disorders. And of course, this is getting our attention because now we're actually seeing clear evidence that this is an equal opportunity disease, and it's also affecting a lot of our young people. So who are the people with a substance use disorder? They're everybody. This is an equal opportunity disease. I think for a long time, one reason communities did not come together like this is because we assumed this was more of a population-based problem, and it really wasn't the community's concern. That it was really more, the so-called crack epidemic and so on. It was more of a poor ghetto problem. And now what we're more aware of, and I've always been aware of it because in my practice I certainly understood it's an equal opportunity disease, is that this is in fact something that's affecting a lot more people than we ever thought before, or were ever aware of. Now, I want to, I'm going backwards, I'm sorry. There we go. So I want to get your attention another way about the impact of this problem. This is a very expensive problem. Conservatively, it's costing our society $500 million a year in terms of all the costs associated with dealing with this particular. If you factor in healthcare costs, in our setting at Duke, for example, we've done studies, and we can tell you that right now in Duke Hospital, we've got somewhere between 30 and 40% of individuals who are occupying those beds who are there due to some attributed substance use concerns. 30 to 40%. Very expensive problem. So that being said, if you look at how we address this problem in terms of most states, we spend about 15% of our total budget on the problem. However, to be clear, 95% of that 15% is spent on the consequences and the cleanup. We're spending less, as you see here, only about 1.9% on prevention and treatment. In other words, we're putting the money into the cleanup, not into the solution. That can change. And I'll look forward to sharing with you opportunities for how that might in fact be possible. So one of the things that you may be already aware of is that this is first and foremost a pediatric problem. Is that we've got pretty good evidence that I work in a program called TROSA, maybe you've heard of it. It's a 2-year residential program for adult substance abusers. And we've got about 550 residents in the program right now. And if you were to do a little survey as to what was the average age of initiation into their drug history before before becoming 18, before becoming adults, you'd see at least 99%. I'd say 99% started at very, very young ages. We were just talking actually in terms of with Carlton at DSS. You guys are seeing kids actually positive for drug use in infancy, and certainly in childhood. It's actually not unusual. I was with a client at TROSA the other day, and I was asking her about her history, and she was her first initiation of heroin was when her mother injected her at age 6 so that she could prostitute the child. These are the kinds of stories that I hate to say are becoming more and more what we hear in our world these days. Is that right? That being said, we also have a pretty good understanding that one reason for this, even in family situations where you don't have parents using drugs, this is an equal opportunity problem once again, and we have a much better understanding that adolescence in and of itself is a vulnerability to that addiction. That kids are hardwired for novelty, stimulation, and in a community like this in particular, if they don't have enough outlets to actually exercise that energy and get those dopamine systems activated, they're going to be drug seeking. And so we know, particularly in communities like this, there's great opportunity to try to affect that change by Palace Point and other venues that enable kids to actually exercise that natural, hardwired desire for novelty, stimulation, and pleasure. So we've got less than half of all new tobacco and marijuana initiates are less than age 18, okay, so more than half. We also have a pretty good understanding that if we could simply delay or eliminate access to nicotine for this population, we'd have a much greater chance of actually kids not using substances. Look at the statistic. When you look at current illicit drug use rates, that we've got 52.9% of adolescents who are currently using illicit substances having initiated their substance use with nicotine. And then if you look at, by comparison, 6.2% are those who did not. So nicotine is in fact a proven gateway and gives us a real opportunity to think about how we can better address that issue in these communities. And then kids, in my experience, tend to be garbage heads. They're not very discriminating about their use, and unfortunately there's now greater access to substances with greater potential dangerousness. So what are some of those trends? You probably have heard about, I'm sorry about this feedback, I'm not sure what to do about it. Maybe I'll put it down. You've probably heard of synthetic drugs such as K2, bath salts, kratom. These are some of the substances that are now out there. We don't even know what these are half the time, and by the time we figure it out and classify it, there's a new drug that comes out on the streets. These are substances that tend to be very dangerous and unfortunately life-changing. We've had actually people admitted to our hospital at Duke who have one-time use of one of these substances. We've got a client right now, she's been catatonic in 3 West at Duke for about 4 months, having actually used one of these substances. Marijuana is not the same marijuana. For those of us who may have experimented in our teenage days, it's not the same marijuana. It's much more concentrated with that psychoactive ingredient known as THC. It's also something that we're seeing more older adults come back around to trying to use it again. The baby boomer population is now actually more at risk for substance abuse problems than ever before. And then, believe it or not, we're seeing a significant uptick in the percentage of individuals admitted to emergency room because of their marijuana use. Heroin, of course, is one of those substances that's been around forever, but these days it's cheaper, it's more concentrated. It's also now oftentimes potentiated by substances such as fentanyl, which is the substance that's oftentimes associated with the overdoses that you hear about in your community. And then, of course, prescription narcotics, analgesics have been around a long time, and they've been abused a long time. I think we're just now realizing, given the percentage increase in overdoses, how much of a problem this is. And so we are seeing that we've got to make some changes in that regard, and I can tell you we are now adopting a much more effective public health approach to how we're both prescribing and then monitoring people who are being given prescription narcotics. Now, one of the things I want to emphasize is that the substance abuse treatment business is not a field of dreams. You don't build this and people come. It doesn't work that way. As a matter of fact, SAMHSA does a study every year where they assess the percentage of individuals who are in need of treatment compared to those who are ready for treatment. And 95.5% of people who actually need treatment are not yet ready for treatment. And so one of the takeaway messages that I'm going to communicate with you is that you can make a difference just in how you communicate with somebody about their behavior as to whether or not they might actually be more willing to think about entering treatment and getting some help. I'll give you a classic example. I have had relationships with a variety of communities around the state to support this issue. And we once had a community session where a High Point police officer was participating in the program. And a testimonial was provided by a woman in recovery. And having been introduced to the High Point police officer, she actually recognized him and she said, "You don't know this, but you're the reason I got into treatment." And he didn't know what she was talking about. He said, "You know, you probably don't remember, but about 5 years ago, when you were processing me through the booking line, having picked me up on a prostitution charge, you actually, while you were processing me, showed real concern and compassion and said, you know, you probably don't want to be here. And my guess is that if it weren't for your cocaine addiction, this is not where you'd be right now. You'd be living a different kind of life. And my concern for you is that you take this opportunity to actually look at that issue and perhaps choose to get some help. And if you do, I just want you to know I'll do everything I can to help that happen." And she said that was it. A 5-minute conversation in a booking line, she's now ready for treatment. So every day we have opportunities, and we'll come back around to talking about this when we talk about the major takeaways. But one of the major ones is we are encountering people with addictions day in and day out and missing opportunities to have the conversation. One of the strategies that we're implementing in places like Duke Hospital are to try to intervene at that point in which people are identified at the earliest point of detection. And I can tell you there's a model called screening, brief intervention, referral, and treatment. And we're trying to integrate this into primary care as well. You might notice as you go to primary care appointments these days, they might be asking you more routinely questions about your substance use. And that's actually an evidence-based way of assessing at an earlier point whether or not anybody needs any kind of support, or at least needs to have a conversation. And one of the things that we have found is just by having the conversation, you promote awareness and might advance some movement toward change. But at Duke Hospital, I can tell you, because I was one of those individuals on the consult intervention team, and there's really no better time than when somebody's laid up in traction because they've fallen down from the stairs from drinking too much to ask the question, might this be a good time to see if you have any concerns about your drinking? And when you leverage those opportunities, it's amazing how responsive people will be because they're at peak awareness. And so these are some of the ways that we know we can address this particular issue. I also want to emphasize, a lot of people think, again, this is a problem of the disenfranchised, disempowered. And yes, it is a problem of the disenfranchised and disempowered, but it's also, as I say, an equal opportunity concern. We've got 77.6% of individuals who have substance use disorders are employed and actually pretty well functioning day to day. However, their lives are still slowly but surely unraveling. We also see that college graduates have a significantly higher rate of incidence for substance use disorders. As we talked about, it's a leading cause of just about every chronic health issue, as well as family violence and abuse and crime and so on. And then you probably already know, about 90% of it, where the sheriff is here, right? 90% or so of individuals who are sitting near a local jail are there due to some alcohol or drug-related issue. And then, of course, the cost of trauma. 90% of individuals coming to Trauma One centers are also addicted. So I've got three primary takeaways for today. One is going to be about this whole issue of addiction as a brain disease and how the science is solid and very informative. And if only we would use what we know, again, we will really make a big difference in terms of how we address this issue. We will also talk about how treatment does work. It does work. I could not be doing this work for 35 years if I didn't believe we were doing some good. It does work, but it only works when recovery is made possible and when made to be worth it. And then the third takeaway is exactly why we're here, which is this is a problem that requires a village approach. As we tell people in our programs, you alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. You need a community of support, and I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. So I'm just going to quickly summarize, because I know we're running low on time, some of these advances and try to cover those takeaways in pretty quick time. So first of all, in terms of the working definition of what is addiction, by the way, I should tell you that years ago, when I first came into the field, I'd say to my patients, you've got a brain disease. And they said, well, how do you know that? And my response was, well, you've seen that commercial on TV with the Friday. Well, that's your brain on drugs. Well, that's all I had back then. Well, today, thanks to neuroimaging technology, we can now actually study the addicted brain before, during, and after drug use and understand at a molecular level exactly what is going on in that brain that explains those behaviors. And that informs the solution. So we talk about it here as a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Dysfunction in circuitries leads to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. This is reflected in an individual pathologically pursuing reward and or relief by substance use and or behaviors. So what do we know about this? We know it is chronic, pervasive, and progressive, just like other kinds of chronic diseases. We know it is treatable. However, there's no known cure. Very much the same as hypertension and diabetes. We don't cure those, but we can facilitate remission and recovery. The other thing is relapse tends to be very common. I know we get very frustrated when we see these people over and over and over again. It is a chronic relapsing disorder, which is not any different. It is not any different than people who suffer from diabetes, hypertension, and certain kinds of cancers for that matter. It's also a disease that's understood by, actually, it's a very complex disease because not only is it a brain disorder in terms of how the brain it responds to drugs, but it's also one in which genetics plays a role. So not all of us are equally vulnerable to addictive disease, just like not all of us are vulnerable to diabetes. We all enter life with different degrees of vulnerability to different things. We do know genetics plays a role that constitutes about 40% of the reason why some people become addicted and other people don't. The other thing we know is that not all of us are going to respond to certain drugs because of that genetic makeup in the same way. There's some of us that could take an opiate, for example, feel nauseous, feel loopy, and not really enjoy it. There are others of us that the minute we use it, we're going to want to use it again. We could do a quick experiment here and make Roxborough history, and I could invite you to participate in a study where I'm going to share, for those of you who want to participate, I'm going to share a little bit of cocaine with you and give you an opportunity. We're not really going to do this. Just be clear, I really did not bring any cocaine. But just to make the point, and distribute equal amounts to those of you who participate, and then go around the room and ask your reactions. And some of you would go, oh my God, this is awful. My heart is racing. I feel like it's going to jump out of my chest. I'm sweating. I'm anxious. I'm all, you know, I feel like I'm jumping out of my skin. Why would people do this drug? Some of you would respond that way. Some of you would go, well, you know, this is interesting. I have a lot of energy. I feel alive. I feel like, you know, I've had a few cups of coffee and I'm ready to go. But, you know, I could take it or leave it, but I can see why people might like it. Some of you would be actually looking at Duke's website and see where you could, where I might be doing another presentation. And come find me as soon as you could. So, you know, in other words, we all enter life with different vulnerability to this. The other thing we know is that it is also associated with learning and memory. That if you have experiences that are tied to the drug use that provide instrumental benefit, you cope get better, you connect better, you feel more alive. You know, there's some kind of reaction that says this is a good experience for me. It becomes a conditioned behavior as much as anything as well. Also, environment does make a difference. If you're exposed to it, if there's opportunity to use it, you know, you're more likely to be vulnerable for it. And then, of course, motivation and choice. You have to choose to want to choose it. Because it's a multifactorial issue, we have to take a multi-pronged approach. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit more. So first of all, why do people use drugs? It really comes down to relief and reward. Relief and reward. Now, in our society, we are conditioned for relief and reward. Think about it. From very young ages, we are bombarded with messages that say pain is unacceptable and fun should be what we're all about. Go home tonight, turn on the news, and you're going to hear a message that says if you have a headache, hot flash, or hemorrhoid, pain sucks, take this medication. We're constantly told this is what life should be about. So the fact people choose to use drugs really makes a lot of sense. And this is where I think that understanding helps provide perspective. How do we know when somebody's developing a disorder? Well, the 4 Ps, people become preoccupied. They plan around it. They prioritize around it. They persist. In other words, I have a choice to watch football this weekend at a friend's house who's got a lousy TV, but he brings in great booze. And I've got a friend who's got a great high definition, but he doesn't drink. Well, I'm going to probably choose the friend who's got the lousy TV and the good booze. In other words, I start making choices and decisions to accommodate my behavior. How do we know when somebody actually has a disorder? When has somebody gone from being a cucumber to a pickle and not going back anymore? Craving, control, loss of control. In other words, they make contracts with themselves. We do this all the time. I planned to actually only drink 6 beers and I still ended up drinking 12. Or I knew I had, you know, I had a big day the next day, and so I was just going to, you know, I was going to just have the one drink, and there I am on the floor again at the end of the night. So when you start violating compacts with yourself, when you start experiencing concern for yourself, but particularly when you start hearing from others that they're concerned about you, which is typically how it first comes to awareness. And then consequences. You continue to do the behavior despite the fact that life doesn't work out for you when you do. And this, you know, this explains the insidious nature of this disease. And typically what happens, just to kind of give you some sense of the progression, is that there's some kind of benefit, that's why you do it, early on in your experience of using substances, and with no downside. As you get habituated, unfortunately, it's a bit of a hangover. It's like you know, you drink a good time, and then you got to deal with the next day, and then you know you recover from that, and then you kind of go back and you have a good time again, but then you have a hangover. And then at the compulsive stage, which is the concern at which we treat people, is that life is just about getting back to normal. You're not even getting high anymore. It's amazing how you hear people spend copious amounts of money every day to inject heroin in their veins, and they're not even getting high. They're not even having fun. They're not even enjoying it. That's the unfortunate nature of this thing. At that point, there's what we call a level of neuroadaptation that's affected that brain. So these are things I've pretty much covered. I want to make a point about how some of these changes in the brain they're fundamental, they're long-lasting, and they might in fact be permanent. So what does that really look like? Well, I know we're running low on time, aren't we? Oh gosh, okay. So do what I can to tell you 2 or 3 things about the brain. One is there's a neurotransmitter in the brain called dopamine. I'm going to guess you've heard dopamine is essential to life. If we don't have dopamine being released in our brain, we're not going to actually eat, drink, procreate, do the things we need to do to promulgate and survive as a species. And when we think about the role of dopamine in the formation of addiction, the thing that we know is, and this has been proven, is that the release of dopamine that you experienced when you were having your bacon and your eggs and everything that looked really good here, is that you're getting this little spike in dopamine, which is actually telling the survival system in your brain, this is good for you. This is necessary. And so that when you experience hunger again, you come to Golden Corral, you might be reminded about that again, you're going to eat bacon and eggs again. Well, that release of dopamine creates that emotional memory and also communicates to the survival system in your brain. This is a necessary function to life. Now, when we talk about, and I don't know how well you can see this graph, but when you talk about the release of dopamine when you have a good meal, compared to the release of dopamine, how much dopamine and also at what rate it gets released compared to a psychoactive substance such as amphetamine, I don't know if you can notice, but this is a 10 times greater volume of dopamine that is being expressed in your brain. In other words, not only are you feeling satiated, you're feeling overwhelmed. Your brain is flooded with this neurotransmitter that is actually sending you to the moon. And what happens is the way we understand this is that there's a chemical imprinting that basically says, this is not any longer what you want to do, this is really what you need to do. And let me show you what that looks like. There's a almond-shaped structure in the middle part of our brains called the amygdala, otherwise known as the fight-flight center of the brain. This is the part of the brain that gets us to do the things we have to do to preserve ourselves. It's an alarm bell, basically. And so we have replicated a number of times a study that shows us that when people are exposed to reminders of that drug use experience, that alarm bell goes off in an involuntary way that basically signals the person to act not based on what they want, but based on what they need for survival. And one way we know this is when we look at an addicted person exposed in an MRI, what's great is you can see what's going on in real time with brain function. When you see how somebody is responding to aesthetically pleasing images such as nature videos and like pastoral landscapes like the drive from Durham to Roxborough, you don't see a lot of reactivity in that amygdala. If you look at, on the other hand, exposure to images such as crack pipes, white powder, and crack houses, what have you, what happens very reliably and autonomically is that this right here says, feed me. This says, feed me. And unfortunately, this is a biological urge that the person believes has to be satiated to survive. Is this making sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so not only does this change, and this is one of these things that it could be permanent, that people have these associations and might have this triggered response, which means in treatment we have to work with people long enough to help them adapt to that, understand it, and learn ways to adapt to it differently, is that there's another part of the brain that's also affected, known as the prefrontal system, which is the part of your brain that's responsible for impulse control, judgment, and so on, reasoning and decision making. And so just to show you one more brain slide, if you look at what a healthy brain looks like that's not affected by drugs, this is what it looks like. See all that red right here? See the coloration? That's metabolic activity and cerebral blood flow and the like. This is what you want your brain to look like. Now, we used to believe cessation of drug use would enable people to function more effectively. Well, what we see here is that this is cocaine-addicted person, drug-free for 2 weeks. Can you notice the difference in his brain compared to control? Don't see a lot of coloration, do you? What that means is addicted brain is not open for business. In other words, this guy's brain can't even cooperate with his attention, particularly if this part of his brain lights up with hunger. In other words, he doesn't have the regulatory mechanism or strength within his chemistry to withstand craving that he's going to use. So this information is very, very important because, one, it reminds us that addiction in itself, while drug use is a choice, although in our society we're conditioned to make that choice, the condition itself is not a choice. And frankly, we from the science, we have a pretty good idea that there are things that we can do in treatment that can make a difference. One is you put guardrails on people. You know, you provide a lot of structure, a lot of accountability, you have reinforcers, you have contingencies. One of the most effective programs for treating addiction in the country are those professional programs for physicians. And of course we might think, well, the doctors are smarter that they stopped using drugs if they've had a problem. No, that's not it. It's because for 5 years they're monitored and closely supervised and supported through an active recovery process that provides support not only when they're in the throes of their addiction, but also as they're in recovery. And so we provide more comprehensive and more long-term services. We also know that stress activates that fight-flight center of the brain. And so we know in this community, if you've got people who are struggling with getting from a Monday to a Tuesday, not wondering where they're going to eat and how they're going to where they're going to lay their head at night, that kind of stress has to be addressed. So we've got to address that issue to help make the change worth it. And then we also now have developed a variety of medication-assisted treatments that really actually dampen that craving response and enable people to actually stabilize more quickly. And then lastly, we know time, connection, and joyful experience are the things that lead to best outcomes. So I'm going to wrap up here with, I've got obviously a lot to say. And I know I'm past time. But I want to kind of, my second takeaway had to do with treatment, and I could say more about treatment. But I want to remind us of this third takeaway, which is really, it really is going to be up to us to affect this problem. And I've got a couple of examples of that, but I'll just give you one quick one as we end. First of all, great quote, any problems faced by the individual and substance user cannot be seen in isolation to their family, local, community, and society. And the other thing we know is the more people around to help, the better. When I see someone in my practice, one of the first questions I ask is, who cares about the fact that you're here today? Who's invested in seeing you live a life of health and wellness and fulfillment? And what can we do to invite those people into your world to support you in this process? You need a community of support. Actually, one patient said in response, oh, you mean like that Verizon commercial on TV where everybody stands behind that guy? I said, yes, that's the image I want you to carry with you. Let's talk about how to mobilize that team. And I'll give you an example, kind of a quick vignette, and then I'm finished. Which is some years ago, I know I surprise you when I tell you that in our program at Duke, we actually every now and then had the occasion to work with a Duke student with an addiction problem. I know I shocked you with that. Well, normally in advance of the session, we would hear from the dean knowing that the referral was coming, because that's usually how Duke students got to us. Well, this Duke student shows up, and he had a very unusual reason for coming to treatment. I never heard this before, which was, when I said, so what brings you here? He said, well, the other night, Mr. Nagy, my fraternity did an intervention on me because they think I'm drinking and drugging too much. Did y'all hear what I said? His fraternity was concerned. Well, I can tell you, when somebody tells me that, you don't have to ask too many more questions to get a good diagnostic impression. Right. So anyway, in our program, we've got a very systems-oriented program. In other words, again, to be in our program, you've got to bring in other people who are going to support you, because we're not going to be with you forever. You know, we want to build up that community of support. And so in his case, his family lived in California. They couldn't participate anyway. So he agreed to actually invite some members of his fraternity to actually come to our education groups and some of our therapy groups. And every week he'd bring 3 or 4, sometimes 5 of his fraternity brothers to actually come and participate. The reason I tell you the story is one particular day, the entire fraternity showed up. And I had no idea they were coming. So they all come into the lobby, and I'm like overwhelmed. I've got to find a space to sit down with all these guys. But I didn't even know why they were there, and I asked the hey, why are all these people here? He went, I don't know. So anyway, we get together, and this one guy says, Mr. Nagy, the reason we're here is Saturday night is our spring fraternity formal. And we won't lie to you, Mr. Nagy, we all get wasted at our spring fraternity formal. And then he looked at the patient and said, and Fred, we're concerned that if you come, this is going to compromise your recovery. We've learned a lot about how we have to do what we can to help minimize your exposures and your persons, places, and things that are associated with alcohol and drug use. But you know, you belong to us. You're one of us, and you have to be a part of this somehow. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you on a rotating group date, and this is what it's going to look like. From 5:30 to 7, Frank is going to carry you to the Angus Farm restaurant. It's your favorite restaurant, and you're going to be Frank's dinner date. And we're going to pay for it. You get whatever you want. And then after dinner, Frank's going to drive you to South Point Mall, and you're going to meet up with David. David's going to be your movie date. You guys are going to watch the new James Bond movie. You've been talking about seeing it. We've already got the tickets, and we'll buy you good and plenty popcorn, whatever you want. We're your movie date. And then after that, David's going to drive you to the video arcade, and you're going to meet up with Ronnie, and Ronnie's going to play video games and hang out with you till the video arcade closes at about midnight or so. At that point, Ronnie will drive you back to Frank's house, and we have all taken a solemn oath in solidarity to recovery that we will stop drinking once we all get to Frank's house. It takes a village. So, anyway, I wish I had that more time. You are the solution. Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever can.
Thank you, Paul. That was a great information. Really appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carl Payne, Director of Person County Department of Social Services, and I'm speaking to you all on behalf of Roots and Wings, the Garden Light and Freedom House, again, DSS. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this morning. I'd like to thank our elected officials, state community leaders. Also like to thank everyone, all the sponsors for this event. This is very vital information as we continue to have more trainings and information later on today and also at luncheon. Those who signed up for the training will be at the Kirby at 7 o'clock, 10 to 12. And the Healthy Personalians going to have a substance use summit. You didn't have to sign up for that, but it's going to be lunch provided today. There will also be at the Kirby from 11 to 1 upstairs. Folks, just one thing, a few things I do want to say. As a DSS social worker and a supervisor, I have 19 years of experience working in Person County with different various backgrounds. I had a conversation with the director of Union County at DSS, and they have a population of about 200,000 folk down in Union County. They have about 65 kids in care, foster care. Here in Person County, we have about 40,000. Person County, we have a population around about 40,000, and right now we have a little over 90 kids in foster care. So this is a serious problem here. We're doing things like this today with our partners because we have to have a new way of fighting the problem. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. If you need more information about anything that's been spoken about today, please reach out to Ms. Martha Pickett at Freedom House, or Ronnie Dubin at Roots and Wings, or myself, Carl Taylor, Person County DSS. There is a Human Services networking list. It is listed on our personcounty.net website under Social Services. You look on the left, it says Human Services networking list. And you click on that, you can kind of see all the different providers here in the county. And again, thank you all for coming out today. This is very important. And again, I want to thank the Chamber for working with us through this. And good to see you all. Have a great day.
I'd like to say thank you to our special presenter, Paul, and everyone for going in and let them, Roots and Wings, Department of Social Services, and the Freedom House for sponsoring this morning's coffee hour and sharing this timely message about the impact substance abuse is having on our community. You give us a lot of information to think about and after we leave this morning, so we appreciate that. It was a great presentation. It's very important to us. If anyone is interested in hosting our next Good Morning Coffee Hour, contact the Chamber to set a date. With that said, I want to thank everyone coming out. Have a good day. Thank you.